Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting for people to find their way out of the waiting room. Brilliant. So welcome to the last event of the day for the Festival of Trusteeship. Tonight we're talking about turning passion into purpose. I'll try and put my teeth in for that. Before I pass over to Sapna, who's running our session tonight, a few bits of housekeeping. So as you've seen, the session is being recorded. You will get access to the recording. That will include the chat. Weekly pass holders are getting the recording at the end of the week. You've been muted on the way in. Please stay muted unless Sapna comes to you to ask to speak to your comment or question. That just keeps the airwaves nice and clear. We've enabled closed captions at our end, so if you want subtitles, you just need to find your CC or closed caption button on your device and press that, and that will enable the subtitles. Please absolutely feel free to use the chat to ask questions, to share experiences. Please keep your comments respectful and kind. Equally, please feel absolutely free to completely ignore the chat, because for some people it's very distracting. It is on the recording, so if you want to catch up with it afterwards, you can do. A reminder that we're holding networking sessions tomorrow evening, Wednesday and Thursday. So if you want a chance to network with other trustees and aspiring trustees and potential trustees, you're very welcome. And I'll share some details in the chat later about the timings and the Zoom links for those. A big thank you to our media partner, Third Sector, who's helped us shout about the festival and got so many people along. And then a huge thank you to Ecclesiastical. They're our main sponsors. Their support means that this whole stand for aspiring trustees is completely free of charge. And even in the rest of the festival, that most you'd pay is £5 for an event. So we're very grateful to them. Can I just ask if Faith from Ecclesiastical is here? Faith, do unmute yourself if you are. No, okay, I don't think she is. So moving swiftly on, before I pass to Sapna, I just wanted to share something with you, which is hot off the press. Ecclesiastical have just done some brand new trustee research, and this is a large number of trustees filling out a survey. And I just wanted to share this one question with you. They asked a lot of trustees, what made you want to become a charity trustee? And people could click lots and lots of different options. They could click as many as they wanted. And I thought for this session, it's really interesting to see that the highest was to help others. That was at 54%. The next one down was to give back to the community, 51%. And then the third one down was quite a long way down, to use my professional skills. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to Sapna. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome along tonight. I am just going to get my slides up on screen. Hopefully, you can now all see that. So welcome along tonight. We're talking about turning passion into purpose and how to find the perfect role. So this is really a session for people who are thinking about, who are early on their journey and who are thinking about the kind of trustee role that might be right for them. So I'm going to be using Menti along the way. I'll give you some instructions in a second, but a bit of an intro to me. So my name's Sapna. I am a lawyer by background, but I now work as a consultant and I sit on a number of boards. I'm also one of the Getting on Board associates, which means I do lots of bits and pieces for Getting on Board, including training on the board leadership program and coaching some of the participants along the way, which has given me lots of good insight into some of the barriers that people find along the way. So we're going to be covering finding your motivation, finding your purpose, and then finding the right role for you. So a bit of housekeeping. Please be present as much as you can. Please be comfortable, be open and engaged. And your questions and comments are welcome throughout. I will try to keep an eye on the chat. And if I miss anything, Penny will give me a bit of a nudge. So for anyone who hasn't used Menti before, it's a bit of an interactive tool that allows you to answer questions and participate in polls and things throughout the way, just so that I can get a bit of a sense of what's going on with you, as well as you hearing from me. So you can either use that QR code or that website there and enter the code. The QR code should take you right to it. And then you will get to participate in some of the interactive elements along the way. I will give everyone a second. If once you're on, you could just click the heart in the corner. It'll give me an indication of how many of you have managed to get on. You might find it easier to do it on your phone while you're on, to do it on a second device or on a second screen, or however is easiest for you. Okay. I think there's quite a few of you on now, so I will move that along. Oh, sorry, Wendy. Don't worry. If you don't have a device that works with it, don't worry about it. It won't stop you from participating and learning along the way. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to start off with finding your motivation. And this is something that we come back to over and over again when we're doing the Charity Board Leadership Programme. It comes up at every stage in the process, and it's something I think it's really important for people to reflect on from the outset. So, falling nicely in line with Penny's comment at the beginning, here's a bit of a question to get us kicked off, which is, why do you want to be a trustee? So what got you coming along tonight? What is it that you want to do? What makes it attractive to you? So you've got a few options there: to make a difference, to make an impact, to develop an experience, to share your skills and experience. Sometimes people like to mentor other people, to share that experience, to expand your network, to get involved with a charitable cause and be part of that team, and to help solve problems that you have lived experience of, or to represent a community. Fantastic. So you can see we're following a very, very similar pattern of lots of people want to make a difference, they want to make an impact. But some of the other things come into it as well. You can see there's a bit of a balance that's shifting around a little bit. But I deliberately included things that are both for the world, for society at large, but also for you personally. And I think it's really important to understand that even though it's a volunteer position, it's still a relationship that everybody gets something out of. Some of being on boards research in the past has shown all of the things that people gain. They gain confidence, they gain professional skills, they gain experience. There's lots of things that we gain out of the experience as well. And it's worth thinking about what you want out of that process before you start choosing which charities you're going on for. Because, for example, if you want something like leadership role, because that's not something you day job, actually looking for an opportunity where you might is really important. And equally, if really what you want to do is make a difference, you might not want to be in a charity where you're a little bit more hands off. Maybe you want something where you get to get your hands dirty, you get that sense of being involved with it and engaged with the community a little bit more. Anything that I missed off that list? Any other reasons why you think you might want to participate or take on a trustee role? A couple of you look like you're looking at your devices, so I'll give it a sec. It does look good on a CV, absolutely. Yep, can let you get involved in an area you're interested in. Absolutely. It does build community. I think it builds your networks, it builds your, particularly if you go for something local, that network is your local community. Absolutely. To help solve a need, to give you that sense of purpose. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all do get that sense of purpose when we're working in these charitable organizations. And yeah, to make sure that boards are diverse, to make sure they're representative of the communities that they are trying to serve. We know that the charity sector just isn't there yet. And it is getting on board, raising Tedra to fix that problem. Absolutely. Yep, learn new skills, fantastic. So yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things I want to say is I don't think, I think sometimes people can feel a bit guilty about the things that they want out of it, like learning new skills, like developing. And actually, I don't think there's a need to. The reality is when you connect with that, it helps you connect to why you want to be there, your motivation. And it helps to keep you motivated when you have conversations about those things. So just to cement that, knowing your why helps you to achieve your goals, helps you to maintain your motivation, and it also helps you to make a bigger difference in the organizations because you choose the right ones that meet your needs as well as you meeting theirs. And it's something that charities care about just as much as individuals, because charities often have problems with trustees who struggle with the time commitment or aren't always as engaged as they would like them to be. Where it's not always where the governance isn't always working. And I think there's only ever an increasing focus from charities on trying to test that motivation skill. So actually, compared to applying for a professional role where you don't often really need to explain that why very much, where you might just really it's the next step for you. You're applying for a promotion or you're applying for a move to get more experience in your field of expertise, and that motivation is kind of assumed. It's less so when you're applying for a trustee role, and actually they will probe your motivation a bit. They will probe your why, because they want to know that they are getting trustees who will be engaged and committed and effective in their roles. So next, I wanted to talk about finding your purpose. So I want to talk about a concept called ikigai, which translates roughly as a reason for being. And it's an exercise that I sometimes do when I'm coaching aspiring trustees who are struggling to figure out where to focus attention. And that can be a bit of a barrier for them. And actually, it's one of the most common reasons that we come across aspiring trustees who don't quite find the role that they're looking for. And it's because they've not quite narrowed down what they're looking for. And they struggle to articulate that why. They struggle to articulate why they want one. And they perhaps take a bit of a scattergun approach sometimes, applying for lots and lots of different organizations, because they've not had the opportunity to spend the time and identify what it is they focus on. So another question for the room is, do you know what kind of charity you would like to be the trustee of? Okay, our focused ones have got right in there. Okay, fantastic. So actually, most people seem to have quite a strong idea, but we've got a few who are a little bit more unsure. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, this is a bit of a sort of simplified diagram that I find really useful when thinking about Ikigai, and in terms of helping people to think about where you want to get to the center of. So Ikigai says that actually your purpose sits at the center of what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you are good at. And so it's really important to reflect on all of those things. And you can see how it talks about that once it's a little bit off balance and you end up in different spaces, you might end up feeling satisfied but not very useful, or you might end up feeling excitement but a bit of uncertainty because it's not quite hitting those other marks. So it's important to think about it in a balanced way, and what might really be at the center of those things. So I've got a few case studies for us to work through with examples of people who to tell you a bit about each of those people. So our first case study, we've got a person who loves their family, dog, hiking, quite an active person. So when they say what they're good at, they talk about being sporty, being social. They're also very organized, which links to what they get paid for. They're a project manager and they're working in a financial service firm. And when they talk about what the world needs, they think the priority is to appreciate and protect our natural environment. So my question for you is, what kind of organization would you put this person in? Yeah. Fantastic. So everybody's gone for the environmental or animal charities, climate change. But I like that somebody else has also thought about a school, because absolutely, when you're trying to, it doesn't always have to be those large charities. It can often be promoting that cause within a local organisation. Apologies, anyone, if you can hear my dog. Somebody's just let off some fireworks and he's having a bit of a yap in the background. So yeah, mental health outdoor charity, again, looking at that intersection is really important. And it doesn't always need to be really focused on one area. It is worth looking a little bit broader, seeing where there are opportunities for you to explore the things that you care about. So here's a second case study. So what I love, community, culture, travel. What I'm good at, building relationships, campaigning, and writing. Unsurprisingly, gets paid for being a comms advisor at a university. And when they're talking about what the world needs, is to have more resilient communities that look out for one another. So I'm going to ask you again, what kind of charity do you think they could make the biggest impact in? Arts and theatre, community centres. Yep, refugee support charity. Like if I'm just saying anybody, yeah, actually, lots of charities need people who are good at campaigning and comms, and it can be exceptionally useful at a board level. Fantastic. And I think one of the things you're illustrating as we're going through these suggestions is that sometimes people can be really nervous now because they think they're cutting out options and they don't get anything if you put a bit of a spin, a focus on what they're doing. But I always say you don't need to pick one cause that you care about. We're all multi-dimensional human beings. We can care about more than one thing. And it's absolutely fine to have 2 or 3 different areas that you want to focus on and to look for organizations in those areas. But it can be exceptionally hard to look for opportunities when you don't have an idea at all of where you want to focus on. Okay. Going to take you through another case study. So what I love, my kids, art and music. So we've got a creative person here. They're good at playing music. They're good at cooking. They get paid for tutoring young musicians and they've got their own jewelry making business. And when they were asked about what the world needs, they want it to be more just and equitable. And they also want a little bit more joy in the world. What kind of charities do you think make the biggest impact on? Yep. Arts and culture, again, the community centres. Yep, working with kids. Yep, art and music therapy. Again, seeing where, things you love meet those bigger causes is fantastic. Supporting startups and arts and culture. Yep. Young people. Fantastic. Thank you. So, bit of a question for the room. Has that got any of you thinking about what you want? Anybody want to come in at this point and share a bit about how that might have impacted what they've been thinking about their own journey? Okay, I think we've got a shyer bunch today, but hopefully that has helped you reflect. I know there are a few beginning who said you were a little bit unsure. about what you wanted to do, and actually sitting and doing that exercise. When I send the slides out, I'm also going to send out that template for everyone. So you can. So if you are one of those people who's feeling a bit more unsure about what you want to do, you're not sure what kind of role it is that you want to go for, then you can spend some time reflecting on those areas in your own life and where you might want to start focusing your attention when it comes to your own search for a trustee position. So next, I want to talk a bit about finding a role. So when it comes to finding a role, it is incredibly important to identify the right organizations that you want to go for. I think another thing that we come up against when working with some of our aspiring trustees or people who have just secured their first position is that sometimes people go for the first role because they're so flattered, they get tapped on the shoulder or they get invited, and the first one that they get, they maybe go through a bit of a rushed process and they don't have the time to do all of the due diligence that they might do. And sometimes they end up in the wrong role. I have worked with some people who have come in and gone 6 months in, oh gosh, I think I've made a mistake and I've ended up in the wrong organization and it doesn't quite meet my needs, or I'm finding I'm having issues with values and it's just not quite the right match for me. So it's really important to think not just about the cause, but also about the organization itself. Does that organization match your values? Does that cause align with your purpose in terms of the type of organization that you're going for? It's also worth thinking about the community that you want to serve. So there are some organizations who don't just serve a particular cause, but also serve particular sections of the community. And some of you mentioned in your reasons that you wanted to work with, or that you wanted to represent your community, that you wanted to serve your community. And I think that is really important. And I mean community in whatever sense of the word, whether that is your local area, whether that is about people like you, whether it's about a particular characteristic. So it's really important to reflect on the community that you want to serve, and to think also about small and local and not just big name charities. Again, one of the barriers we sometimes hear is that I sometimes get aspiring trustees and I go, okay, so where have you been looking? And they go, the Guardian website. And I go, well, to advertise on the Guardian website, you've got to have quite a lot of money as a charity. The reality is you're not going to find your little charities, your local organizations and so on, advertising in some of the more expensive places. And it's really important. I think particularly if it's your first trustee position, the chances are you're more likely to get a position in a small or medium-sized charity rather than some of those big names. I think it's worth also thinking about some of those big names don't often recruit for the same reasons, because they've got really big internal teams. They don't necessarily need people with specific skills on the board in the same way. They might be recruiting for your ability to help with fundraising or your little black book and things like that as well. So it's worth thinking. There are so many charities in the UK, and it's really worth thinking beyond those big names that you think of in terms of who you're going for. Another thing that we talk about is thinking about the different roles that you might have. Sometimes you don't always start off as a trustee with an organization. Sometimes you build those relationships over time. And, I have joined the board of an organization where I volunteered for many years before I ever joined any sort of formal committee. So thinking about those organizations that you work with, particularly if you are part of professional associations, for example, or if you're part of groups as those other organizations, maybe what you want to do is help other people in your profession. Maybe you want to make sure that the next generation don't have to face the same barriers that you did. So it's worth thinking about the broad range of governance roles. You know, sometimes you might want to be on a volunteer committee, things like patient groups. Sometimes you might want to join a committee. Sometimes you might just want to be a finished group or working group, because actually, you know, a long 3-year commitment might feel a bit much for you just now, but actually a short-term working group that's 6 months long might feel a lot more manageable. And all of those things add to your governance experience and help you on to the next stage. So it's really worth thinking about it. And particularly with larger organizations, sometimes that's the way to get your foot in the door. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about was making yourself visible. And this becomes really, really important because we know that about 90% of those vacancies are not advertised. So they are not visible to you. So if you're not visible to the people who are looking for trustees, then it's incredibly difficult to get a position. So it's really important to think about how you are positioning yourself, whether you are telling people that this is what you want to do or not, whether you are communicating that out into the world, because actually still the vast majority of trustee positions are not openly advertised. It does involve a tap on the shoulder from someone, and actually if they don't know that you're willing, they may never come knocking. Now, that's not to say that you cannot get a trustee position through open recruitment. We're definitely working very, very hard to make sure that more and more organisations are advertising. And you know, you talk to recruiters, they're all saying there's a lot more pressure on organisations now to go through those formal processes, and you can get a role you know, by submitting an application, but you absolutely increase your chances if you make yourself visible and you communicate out into the world that you are looking for a trusteeship. So if you've got target organisations, go connect them and their people on social media. Follow what they're doing, engage with them, let them know that you are interested in their cause. And find opportunities to network in those communities. You know, if there are opportunities to do a charitable event, if there's opportunities to, you know, organize a fundraiser, you know, if you're somebody unlike me who's going to do a marathon or who is going to do a bake sale, whatever you're going to do, try and get into the orbit of the organizations that you're targeting. And particularly if you're very, very focused, if you're one of those people who was saying, I'm really just one cause I'm looking for, actually, when you are that focused, sometimes it's more about building that longer term relationships than it is about that application, because actually they want somebody, they'll often go for those people in their orbit and in their networks. So building those relationships and let your network know that you want to, that you are looking to get involved. I often say to people to put the phrase aspiring trustee on their LinkedIn profile. And that's because lots of recruiters or HR people will look for people on LinkedIn, and the only way that you'll come up in their searches is if the word trustee is somewhere in your profile. So I'm not saying be dishonest about it, but say aspiring trustee, and you'll still come up in those searches when they're looking for people on the platform. It's also important to start looking in the right places. So we talked earlier about some of those websites being incredibly inaccessible, particularly small charities with small budgets. So Reach Volunteering is a great platform at getting on board. We partner with them a lot, and they've done a lot of great work on designing inclusive recruitment processes for trustees. They've got a lot of vacancies on there. Again, you can, while it's for volunteering opportunities, generally narrow it down by putting in terms like trustee or board, and it'll come up with the vacancies that are right for you. Yes, as far as I'm aware, Abby, Reach is a national platform. Although there are some, I'm assuming from your question, you might be based in Scotland. And if so, there are also some dedicated Scottish sites as well that you can look on. So things like Good Moves, or changing the chemistry and so on. So I would say that there are national sort of sites as well that are worth looking at. And if you do a bit of research, you will find them. The other thing I am flagging here is that if you belong to an underrepresented groups, it is worth getting involved with some of the targeted groups there. Sometimes it's not always a sort of formal board, but you'll find people sharing vacancies with organisations that they're working with, where they're making a particularly conscious effort on EDI and on diversifying their board. So if you're not yet a member of Action for Trustee Racial Diversity or Young Trustees or Queer Trustees or any of those groups, please have a think about it. It really helps with building that community, with having that peer network of people to go along the process with. Because it really can be, it's quite a different process to applying for professional jobs, and it's really important to have that network around you to help you through. And yeah, have a look, set up your alerts for things like LinkedIn and social media, and make sure that some of those vacancies are coming to you to try and make that job a little bit easier for you. Okay. I also wanted to talk about knowing what you have to offer. I think a lot of people, again, struggle with this a little bit because it's a little bit different to when you're applying for a professional position, where you really are focusing on your professional experience and your education. And it's about a lot of badges and certificates and sort of ticking those boxes. But actually what people are interested in when you're applying for a trustee position and volunteer positions can be quite different. And it's not to say that your professional experience doesn't matter, or that your education is not relevant. It absolutely is, but I think there's a slightly different focus when these applications are being evaluated. So one of the things I always ask people to do is to highlight your governance experience. And often people will tell me that they don't have any, but once we get chatting, it turns out they've got a lot more than they thought they did. Whether it is you've been on the PTA, or you were, you had a post in your student union, or you ran clubs, those are all governance positions. And it's really important to think about where you've had that governance experience before. Maybe you've been involved in a working group at work, maybe you've been involved in a committee, but it's essentially those decision-making structures are really important examples of your governance experience, and it is worth giving them sort of special note on your application and thinking about them as examples when it comes to things like your STAR case studies, as well as your professional experience, because what they show is your ability to go be part of a group, of a sort of decision-making structure, to work with others, to take that leadership on. And they show something a little bit different to what you might be doing in your day job, where you might have that authority sort of given to you naturally by virtue of your position. It involves a lot more working by consensus, working collaboratively. Okay. Next, your professional experience. Now, this can be really relevant, particularly when the advert says we're looking for a digital trustee and an HR trustee and an ex-trustee. When they've got those sort of criteria there, really bringing out your professional experience and saying, that this is what I bring in that space. So really important. But sometimes you might want to give it a little bit of a different slant to how you might present it in a professional CV. Again, you might want to talk about things like your influencing, where you've managed to get a project across the line. It might not be quite so much about your targets, because you've got to remember that as a member of a board, you're not sort of part of the daily executive decision making. You are a trustee, you are that step removed. So maybe when you've been a bit more strategic, when you've been able to get involved in things like a strategy consultation process, for example. So you might think about examples where you've had that broader experience, where you've had the opportunity to step a little bit outside of the day-to-day. Next, I wanted to talk a bit about lived experience. Again, I think it's something we don't talk about quite as much on our professional CVs, but actually, when it comes to a trustee application, it's more important and more relevant. But I do say that with a bit of a caveat that I think you should only ever share as much as you're comfortable talking about. Now, obviously, sharing something that, there's every likelihood that if you share it in your application that there might be a follow-up question at interview. And if it's something that's going to make you feel upset, if it's something that's going to be difficult for you to discuss, I wouldn't advise sharing it. But I say that, I bring it up because when it comes to your why, it can be an incredibly powerful tool for disclosing some of your lived experience as to why you want to work for an organization, why you care about the cause, what your connection is. Can be a really powerful way of showing your motivation, your commitment to that charity. So, for example, one of my positions is with NHS Blood and Transplant. Transplant is something that has affected my family. We've got a couple of people who are recipients. We've also got a couple of people who are donors amongst the family. It's very likely to be something that affects me later in life. And you will find lots of people who work for organizations with those kinds of connections. And I think sometimes, you might not necessarily articulate that when you're applying for a professional role, but actually it's much more welcome in this kind of process. They want to hear about your connection. They want to know that you can advocate for the people who are affected by these things directly. They want to know if you might be one of those people who are affected by things directly. So it's worth having a reflection about what your connection is, whether you've got lived experience to bring to the table. And we've all got lived experience of different systems. We've all been through an education process. We've all been, health services. We've all got experience of those systems around us, of those ecosystems. And it's worth reflecting on how your experience might have shaped why you want to do or take on a particular cause or a particular role. And again, coming back to that motivation, are you going to be a committed trustee? So articulating that commitment is really important to get across, to show them what you bring to the table, what you've got to offer. Okay, so now we're moving on to the Q&A portion. So I'll give you a second. Feel free to pop it in the chat if that's easier for you, if you've not been able to access the Menti. Or if you'd rather pop your hand up at this stage, please do as well. Queer trustees. So I think Penny has put a link in the chat for you all. Queer trustees is probably one of the ones that's, I'd say, least formal in its setup, in that it's mostly social media groups. I think as compared to something like Young Trustees, which is much more formal in its structure. But it is definitely worth linking in with people who are on your journey and facing those same barriers. I think it's really important because particularly certain barriers tend to be very specific to different groups. So it's really important. So for example, we know that people with non-traditional or non-modernized names tend to experience more barriers in the recruitment process. And it's only going to be a certain group of people. And you might want to have a chat with someone about actually what do you do? Do you want to present your name in a different way? Do you want to be really bold about it and actually say, I don't want to hide what I am, and if it makes a difference in your decision making. So worth thinking about and talking through. How competitive, difficult is it to be accepted as a trustee? So That's a really tough question to answer, because I think it really, really does depend on the organisation. You will find some really large charities, and as somebody who's been, you know, I was an in-house lawyer within large charities, you know, they were really, really formal processes with very, very high level executive search firms, and really often they were looking for big names and they were looking for you know, particular criteria, and there really was a very specific profile to what they were looking for, and they are incredibly competitive processes. But equally, when you look more broadly and you look at different types of organizations, Penny, I'm going to ask you to remind me of the stats around the vacancies, if you are able to reel them off the top of your head.
The numbers of vacancies up there.
Yeah,
so 90,000.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so there are 90,000 vacancies at any given time, and I think if you're willing to put the time in and to find the ones that are right for you, and to look at different types of organizations, because as much as, you know, we ask organizations to open their eyes as to thinking about different types of candidates, we also spend some time asking the potential aspiring trustees about opening up their eyes to different types of organizations that they might not have thought of before, that they might not have encountered. And there are some great things you can do, like the Charity Commission website is great for trying to find organisations in your area that focus on the cause that you want to look into. So there are lots of ways to actually really track down those organisations, and sometimes you can be really proactive and reach out to them instead of waiting for the vacancy to arise. How do I narrow down a very long list of possibilities? I think it is definitely about prioritizing. You talked about the Ikigai template earlier, which is one of the things I do with people in coaching, about kind of narrowing it down to actually what makes the most sense, because lots of things will make sense. Like I said, we're all very complex human beings. We all do lots of things. And often we can sit there thinking, I could do lots and lots of things. But actually trying to focus down really does help you to not just think about where you can make an impact, but where you can make the most impact, where you're going to be the most effective, where you're going to make the biggest difference. And if that is what motivates you, if you're one of those many people who at the beginning said, I really want to do this because I want to make a difference, then really sort of something in trying to find the place where you're going to make the most difference. Even if, you know, because I think as you go along your journey, you'll find that if you maybe go for one of those places where it's okay, it's a fit, but you don't make the most difference, having that long-term commitment is a little bit harder. Keeping that motivation going through your 3-year term or your 6 years on the board or whatever gets a little bit tougher. If you applied for a trustee role but didn't get the role shortlisted from CV, how is it best to know where to improve your CV cover letter when there's no feedback given? I think it is, yeah, there are lots of organisations who are not great at this part of the process, and they don't always give back feedback, and that can be incredibly tough. I think we've talked a bit today about some of the ways in which doing a CV and application for a trustee role is a little bit different to a traditional sort of professional job application. And I think it's worth thinking about those things. Again, sometimes that's where I find people who have struggled at that hurdle is that they've maybe not put their why in so much, or they've maybe not highlighted governance and volunteering experience, even though they've got loads of it. It just didn't occur to them to make that a profile. So it's worth thinking about those things. There are a lot of templates available online, so you can have a look at getting on board, have a look at dynamic boards. There's lots of sites out there. Reach Volunteering, I think, have got some templates as well. So it's worth having a look at the different templates and approaches and thinking about maybe how you may or may not fit those approaches. And if you want to get feedback, it's probably worth me giving a little plug, Penny, to the Getting on Board services here, if there are coaching services and things that you can access as well. Obviously, you can reach out in your network if you know somebody who is an existing trustee and get them to have a look. There are lots of ways to kind of get that feedback in a different way if you're not getting it from the organisations. And often organisations will only give feedback on the ones that got shortlisted, which can make it exceptionally tough. So it's really important to build those networks. Are people expected to have some strategic experience? I don't think I did. Not until I got there. If I think back to what my own board experience, actually, boards are where I got my strategic experience, not that I brought them. And they will expect it for certain roles, but they won't expect it for every role. And again, the expectations will be different depending on the size of the organization, depending on the nature of the organization, depending on how committed they are to widening participation in their organization and removing some of those barriers. So I don't think it will always be expected, but I do think in some of those big charities and sort of those kind of very, very competitive roles, it will be. They will say, we want an executive with 20 years experience under their belt. But that's generally not the ones people are going for sort of at the beginning of their trustee journey. Any tips on deciding whether to go for a board or operational role? I think I might need to, does the person who asked this want to come in and give me a little bit more context? Do you mean you're sort of thinking about whether to, do you mean with a charity, a volunteering role? Do you mean deciding between sort of having a portfolio or having an executive position? I think that's probably a bigger question that probably needs a little bit of chat. So if you want to reach out separately, please do. And I'm happy to cover that separately. But yeah, there's a big depends on kind of how you want to engage with that organization. And thinking about it can be very, very organization specific. How many times do we need to identify it? As often as it changes. I think it's worth going back and looking at your plan, once in a while and going, actually, does this still fit? Because we all grow and we all change. And what we care about changes, something will happen in your life. Lots of people, you have those milestones, you become a parent or you become a carer of your parents, or you become, something changes in your life and the causes that you care about shifted, you experience discrimination in your personal life and you become much more committed to making sure that someone else doesn't. And I think when you experience those shifts, it's important to go back and reflect, because, your volunteering time is something that you're giving up. And I think you want to make sure you're giving it well, and to things that you care about, to places where you can make a difference. So it's definitely worth going back and reflecting on those things and making sure that, an organization that might have been a good fit 3 years ago might not feel like a good fit now. And it's okay to change it up and go find something else. Again, we work with people who are looking for their second or their third role because actually they found that the first role wasn't a great fit. Or they found that things have moved on and they want to work for a different kind of cause now. They want to work with a different kind of organization. How do I find the balance between making a difference and using my skills for the cause I want to support versus developing my own skills and experience? So I think it's worth having a conversation with them when you get on board. I say to people, if you're really looking to develop your own skills, think about how you want to do it. Think about what skills you want to develop. What is it that you want exposure to? And it's a very valid question to ask in the interview process, going, okay, I'm bringing you my skills in comms and marketing, but equally, I really want more exposure to strategic development. How can I be more involved in that process as it comes up, and letting them know ahead of time that it's something you want to be involved in, that you want to be on the working group for the strategy development, that you want to be on a particular subcommittee. You might say, well, I want to be on the EDI subcommittee, or I want to be on the finance and governance subcommittee, because while it's not my background, it's something I want to learn about and I want to make sure I'm getting that exposure. They're very valid wants and asks. And it's worth bringing up early to set their expectations, to set your own, because maybe they're going to say, sorry, there's only 2 board members per committee and we've already got those 2 filled. So you get to know before you go in making that decision. So I think it's definitely worth knowing what you want, knowing what you need, and also asking them about the other stuff, right? Actually, how can you make a difference? What's their best way to fit you in? And how can your skills best contribute to the organization and the cause? Tips for overcoming imposter syndrome. So I am leading the panel session on Friday on this very topic. And I guess I will give a couple of things here. Is one of the things I remind people of is that actually, you might say it takes me 3 months to get my feet under the table in a day job, but you will not even have had that same amount of time with the other members of your board come in a year's time on a board. It takes longer to get your feet under the table, to learn the ropes. I always say people give yourself a full cycle. So a full board cycle. So generally, your board will run on an annual cycle. So you'll do the strategy development at one point, you'll do the budget setting at another, and those things will come around year after year. So make sure you've got given yourself that time. So be kind to yourself around how much time it might take you to learn. Ask for the support that you need. Sometimes it can feel quite daunting to ask certain questions. I think in the last session, people were asking about, there was a question about asking questions outside. I particularly say that for new trustees, right? If there's a document that's come in the pack and you've gone, oh my gosh, I don't understand this, talk to the person that prepared that paper. Say, can I have 10 minutes in a briefing and a talk through before the meeting to help you feel better equipped for when you're going into the boardroom and better able to contribute, and to not feel so ask for the help, ask for a mentor, ask for pairing, ask to meet everybody, do those things that help you feel comfortable, and again, be open about what you need and what might help you along the way. How do I network with other trustees? Come to our networking events. There are 3 of them this week. So come meet other trustees that way. Also doing some of the training, you'll find that getting on board's got the trustee learning program and other things. Again, all of those networks that I talked about, like the Young Trustees, Action for Trustee Racial Diversity, they've all got networking events as well. A lot of them are free to attend. So whether virtual or face-to-face. So it is absolutely worth doing that. If you're lighter on time, again, think about things like LinkedIn groups. So getting on social media to hear about their experiences. There are lots of events going on, many of them free to attend. So it really is very accessible to hear. You're talking about a volunteer community. They are full of very, very active volunteers. And there's lots of ways to network, and it's worth looking into the networks that sort of suit you best and fit best with your experiences. Okay, I think that's back to the beginning.
Sapna, there was one question in the chat from Paula, which was far back in the chat. She said, you've touched on the difference between being a trustee and an executive in business. This comes up often in interviews. What is your advice on this point?
How to answer the question, what's the difference between an executive and a non-executive? Okay, so for people who are unfamiliar with the terminology, non-executive is just the corporate word for trustee. So, and it just means you sit on at a board level. So the executives are the decision makers in the organization, the people in charge of the day-to-day running. And your non-executives and trustees sit on the board above them. So generally your CEO will report to the chair of the board, and your non-executives are really there for governance, strategy, oversight. So they are there as a check and balance. They are your House of Lords to the Houses of Parliament. They are there to act as that, to provide leadership, to provide a check and balance. but at that strategic level. So they don't take part in the day-to-day decision making. They're not there for it. So unless a decision has particular strategic importance, generally when they're checking, when they're being presented to on the activities of the charity, they're being asked to to say, does this fit with the strategic plan? Is this going to get us where we're going to go? They don't tend to get involved in the nitty-gritty. Now, there are always circumstances where they do. And I would say the smaller the organization, the fewer the staff, the more operational you will find that trustees are, and that line between executive and non-executive can get really quite blurred. I have one of the boards that I've worked a lot with. We've done a lot on that, because when I joined the board, the board was very, very operational. They effectively worked as if they were all director of a department. And actually, it's taken a lot of work to then build up the team and wean them off that level of support, and equally get the board comfortable stepping away and actually giving them a bit more space to lead and giving them the room to grow. So it's been a really complex exercise. Equally, I would say that it tends to be a bit of a curve, in that you'll find that the line gets most blurred when an organization's in crisis. So that particular organization I'm referring to had been in financial crisis. So basically, it had been in financial crisis, it had got close to closing its doors, and the board all went, right, we're taking the reins. And actually, I guess when I joined, it was that process of taking everyone through, of letting those reins go again. So it's not always a bad thing, is what I'll say. It's not an inherently bad thing if boards are being more proactive or more operational. There are points in time where that makes sense. But you should always be trying to get backwards. One of the analogies I use is that you are the driving instructor, not the driver. And you might hit your pedal sometimes, your emergency pedal to the brake, when you're a bit worried about what the person in the driver's seat's doing. But ultimately, really, you want to get back to a position where you're letting them drive. I think I'm just having a quick look at the chat. I think somebody explained that question, the board versus operation question earlier. The Charity Governance Code does usher boards to be strategic rather than operational, whereas I find trustees can prefer being. So I think we've answered that a bit in this question, Chris, about the board versus operation. And like I say, small organizations, particularly the tiny ones where they don't have any staff, you will find people being very operational, and they're effectively volunteer members of staff. But they're given that sort of board to sort of give them something in exchange. And I think so it can be, but there are circumstances where it's okay to get a little bit operational. But yeah, really, it is about moving boards towards being more strategic as often as you can. Okay, thank you, everyone. Penny, I think I've left you your 2 minutes for the final wrap up. I'll hand back over.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sapna. I've posted a link to the evaluation form in the chat. Please do tell us what you thought of this session. I've also posted a link to tomorrow night's networking session. So it's 7:30 tomorrow night. You don't need to book, just copy that link and follow that. It'll also be in your follow-up email. And that's just a chance to meet with other aspiring and potential trustees and with other serving trustees and have a chat, basically. Please also have a look at what else we've got going on in the Festival of Trusteeship. This is our 4th of 23 events this week. So do have a look. Have a look in particular at the Aspiring Trustee strand. Presumably most people here are looking for their first role or for their next role. The whole strand is at 6:30 every night and it's free of charge. Also, Sapna signposted at various points this evening about the other support that Getting On Board offers. So do please have a look at our website at gettingonboard.org. We've got a free guide to becoming a trustee. We've got template CV and cover letter. We've got links to websites where you can find vacancies. So it's all going on there. So I hope you have a lovely evening and thank you very much for joining us for this session. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.